A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of semester 2, and I hope all of you are doing well. You are staying safe and sound at your homes, and also that you're keeping up with your studies. Now, for CN 603, we will continue where we had left off last week. Just let me quickly share my screen. Okay. Now, uh, so we started with week 1. Okay, week 1 we had the lecture, the quiz, and the tutorial. Last week we had very much the same thing. Okay, and this week we'll also have the same thing, but with the tutorial class we'll have a little lab. Okay, so what I've thought is last week I did mention that we'll go over DFDs, but just reconsidering by looking at our week 3 lectures, we'll not go over DFDs, but instead we'll go over PERT charts. Now, what PERT charts are and how we go on doing it, now you'll have a basic idea just by looking at week 3 lecture notes. However, more will be spoken about it and way more will be discussed about it in our tutorial/lab class for this particular week. So far, has anyone any questions or queries? If you have any confusions, do let me know. Okay, so we can tackle those before you face any further issues. How's your quiz going on so far? Lecture 1, lecture 2 quiz. All good so far, everyone?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so far so good. Now, week 3 for semester 2 for CN 603. So you are supposed to do the following tasks. So first of all, you are supposed to attend your Zoom-based lecture class, which is this particular session. After that, you will have to go and attempt your lecture-based quiz. Now, do you know that your lecture-based quiz, the due date is on the 31st of October, but if you thoroughly go over your lecture notes, you thoroughly go over your tutorials, then attempting your lecture-based quiz will be even more simple and easy. And then you have your tutorial questions which needs to be answered, and the discussions will take place in the tutorial class, and which is point number 4. So if you have any further questions or queries, you can always feel free to drop me an email, or you can always drop me a message on Moodle. Now, as for your lecture-based quiz, I did receive some queries about some of the questions where you felt that you were right, but the answers were marked wrong. Now, so far, I can reconfirm you this. Your lecture-based 1 and your lecture-based quiz 2, they do not have any issues. Now, since it's multiple choice and since it is assessed towards the coursework, it wouldn't be so easy as you would have for 500 level courses. Okay, so please be careful while you actually trying to answer these questions. Now, some of the multiple choices, they are very close to one another. Do think about it before you actually attempt, because here's the thing, it's just one attempt only. Once it's marked wrong, you lose that mark straight away. All right, now over, I'll just go and reiterate on this. The assessments, your weekly quiz is ongoing, contributes 10% towards your coursework. Okay, now I am going over this each and every week so that I am just giving you a keen idea of how important these things are. Okay, so you have close to about 10 lecture-based quiz, out of which you'll get 10%. So that means one quiz is approximately 1% towards your coursework. All right. And your mid-semester exam, currently I am in the process of making your mid-semester exam assessment. It will take me time, let's say this week or next week, but on week 7 section of the Moodle show, which will be somewhere down the line, okay, 4 weeks from now, you wouldn't have any lecture notes or you wouldn't have any tutorials on that particular section of the Moodle shell. You'll only have your mid-semester exam. All right. Now, we will conduct a revision class in due time. I will tell you how the revision class will be conducted and what all things will be there. I'll let you know how it will be going, or what I plan and how things will be. I'll let you know by week 5, most definitely. Now, let's go over our lecture notes, shall we? I hope you all are able to see the slide. If you aren't, please please feel free to unmute your mic and let me know. Or you can always drop me a chat message on the Zoom platform. Now, this week, okay, is the chapter 3 of the book System Analysis and Design. We're looking at the 9th edition of the book by Shelley Cashman. So she has a series of books on system analysis and design. Now, chapter 3 talks about managing systems project. So when we manage systems project, okay, the main thing that comes into the mind is who is managing it, or who is the project manager, or what a project manager is. So basically, this particular sub topic, managing systems project, is all about a project manager's work, because we know that when you are doing a project, the project manager plays a key role because he or she ends up leading the project. So let's go and hop into it. Now, objective, okay, in this set of lecture slides, you will learn what project planning is, what scheduling is, monitoring is, and reporting is rather. Now, all these are can be considered different parts of the phases of the system analysis and design process. You have planning. Planning is very important. Okay, now we'll discuss more about it in the next few slides. The next point is describe work breakdown structures, task patterns, and critical path analysis. And thirdly, we look at some of the techniques in which you can look at estimating task completion times and costs. Now, third point is whereby you go and determine how much time would it take a task to be completed. Now, just by looking at it, you can say, okay, it might take about 2 or 3 days. Or let's say you're building a house. Let's say your project is building a house. You would say, all right, this might take about 6 months. You're giving an estimate task completion time. And you say, okay, it might take $200,000 to actually build this house. However, with project managers and with projects, you do not need to just rely on the estimates, but you need to look for techniques which would give you the closest completion time and the cost. So we'll be looking at few of those techniques today in the class. Moreover, you will go around analyzing what are task dependencies, durations, start dates, and end dates. You will describe project management software and how it can assist you in project planning, estimating, scheduling, monitoring, and reporting. Planning is you trying to plan out the project, how you'll go around executing the project, what resources, which people, how many people will be involved here and there. With estimating is you're trying to estimate in terms of time and value, monetary value. Scheduling again comes with time. Monitoring is most likely the control features. You're trying to overlook at things to control elements within your project. And report is the project team reporting to the manager and the project manager reporting to the stakeholders. Next point is we'll discuss the importance of project risk management. What are project risks? How you manage it? How you mitigate it? Actually, there is a process. You need to identify the project risks, and then you need to assess it, and then you try to mitigate it, which is the management phase. And then after that, you need to monitor. It's not that you have mitigated the risk. It may not mean that it's not going to come back. It can always come back. The risk can always be associated in future. So you need to monitor and control it. And finally, you look at some things that may contribute to the failure of system projects, which is the last point. Understand why projects sometimes fail. Introduction. You learn about project planning, estimating, scheduling, monitoring, reporting, and the use of project management software. You also will learn how to control and manage project changes as they occur. So we'll be looking at these things. First one, project management. Okay, we'll look at the overview of it. A successful project can be completed within time, within budget, and deliver a quality product that satisfies users and meets requirements. So generally, when you label a project as successful, which is the ultimate goal of any project, so whatever project you want to involve in, you'd want to ensure that the project is successful. Because if the project is not successful, the other term that may be associated with the project is failure. Failure would mean bad reputation. Failure would mean you have just wasted time, you have just wasted resources, okay, and you have just let the morale of the team down. So always the ultimate goal of any project is to ensure that the project is successful. Now with the word successful, there are other keywords that are associated with it. And those keywords are time, budget, and quality. So that means if a project is successful, that means you have managed your time well. That means you have gone around doing things that reflected the planned budget. And most importantly, you had delivered the quality that was initially planned. Let me repeat that. With a successful project comes in few other things. That is time, you manage your time well, budget, you have stuck to the budget as planned, and quality is you have introduced either a new and improved set of quality, or you have achieved the quality that you had initially planned. And now who ensures it? Whose duty is that? That comes to the third point, the project manager or the project leader or the project coordinator. Now, all those three terms may mean the same thing in different organizations. If you have a small organization, it may be just called as a project leader or a project coordinator. If you're looking at a very large organization, that's where when they call the name as project manager. Now, what does project managers do? Okay, so the project managers have quite a lot of work because generally they are managing the entire project. So with the managing of the entire project comes in few things. Okay, our project manager is the project leader, or project manager basically manages the project. Okay, he or she plans the project, he or she schedules the entire project. When we say schedule, you're looking at the timeliness of the project, what time, which task will be completed, okay, and what would be some of the milestones. And then the project manager basically monitors and controls the project. And finally, the project manager does reporting to the relevant stakeholders. The reporting phase is as important as planning phase. Okay, so generally in a team where they are involved in a project, so every day, every morning, let's say, what the project manager might do is list down some of the tasks that his or her team needs to complete by the end of the day. So at the end of the day, what happens is that these team members, they would report to the project manager the things that they have completed. So what the project manager does is he or she would make a summary of the entire report that has been attained from the team members, and then he or she would need to forward it to the relevant stakeholders. So relevant stakeholders would be the executives of the organization, the management team, you have the finance team, you have some business partners, and you have the users as well. Okay, so basically remember our internal and external stakeholders. So to them. So overview of project management. Now we'll look at some of the things, okay, that a project manager might do in the planning, scheduling, monitoring, and reporting phases. Now, most preferably, what you're looking at is your very first row, you have 3 steps. So these 3 steps, in fact, you have 4 steps. You have 4 steps, and these 4 steps are very important in the very initial phases of your project, in the project development. So you have step 1, create a work breakdown structure. So the work breakdown structure is generally done in the planning phase. Step 2, you identify task patterns. Now we'll later on look at the 3 types of task patterns, but just general at the moment, what are some of the task patterns? So this is generally done in the planning and the scheduling phase. Step 3 is you going around calculating the critical path. The critical path is the important path that the project needs to take in order to ensure that the project completes on time without jeopardizing the resources and the finances. So this takes place in planning and scheduling phases. And finally, manage the operational project. So the managing portion takes place in the monitoring and the reporting phase. This is just a general overview. The breakdown of it will be taking place in the next few slides. So create a work breakdown structure. We're looking at it step one. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and the last portion is all coming from here. Now, step one, create a work breakdown structure. Now, work breakdown structure. Okay, now work breakdown structure, or in simple terms, we call it as WBS. Now, you hardly hear people saying work breakdown structure in project management team or in project management scenario. They will call it as WBS. Okay, means the same thing. Okay, so WBS, now what it does, it involves breaking down a project into smaller tasks. So you have a phase, let's say planning phase. So that planning phase is divided into, let's say, about 5 or 6 smaller tasks. For example, you have planning phase divided into preliminary investigation, feasibility study, systems requests, reporting, and so forth. Okay, that's work breakdown structure. Involves breaking down a project into smaller tasks. And then what is Gantt chart? Now, Gantt chart represents some task groups, can present an overview of the project status, but does not provide detailed information that is necessary when managing a complex project. Okay, now what happens is that you have the work breakdown structure, and the work breakdown structure has the breakdown of tasks. Now, these tasks can be represented in a graphical format, and the name of the graph is Gantt chart. Okay, now before creating the work breakdown structures, you should understand the two primary types of charts that is used to represent WBS, and those two are, one is Gantt chart and the other one is PERT or CPM charts. Let me repeat that. Before you start creating the work breakdown structure, you need to understand two primary types of charts, and these are Gantt charts and PERT, P-E-R-T, or CPM. Now, PERT and CPM, they mean the same thing, CPM charts. To the next slide, what is a PERT and what is a PERT or CPM chart? PERT is the long form. Okay, the long form is Program Evaluation Review Technique, PERT. CPM is Critical Path Method. The distinction between the two methods has disappeared over time. Okay, so generally PERT and CPM, no difference between the two. So if you look at the purpose of PERT or CPM, now it is a statistical tool in project management. It's just like a tool that represents statistics, so it's called a statistical tool. It is designed to analyze and represent the tasks involved in completing a given project. Let me repeat that. Okay, the purpose of PERT or CPM chart, it is a statistical tool, okay, and it is designed to analyze and represent the tasks involved in completing a given project. So what happens is generally you are trying to represent tasks in a graphical format. Okay, now please do note that you need to know some of the tasks of the project managers. Note this down somewhere. You need to know what all things a project manager does. You need to know what is work breakdown structure, and you also need to know what is a PERT or CPM chart. All right, slide number 10. Now what you're seeing on slide number 10 is an example of a Gantt chart. All right, now notice this. You have your planning team. So that's the planning phase. So the planning phase is represented in the blue lines. So planning has been divided into 3 tasks. You have the overall architecture, project planning, and test plan. This is just a simple example that I'm giving in the moment. Okay, now later on you'll learn how to go around creating a Gantt chart and a PERT chart altogether. Now, Gantt chart, if we try to define a Gantt chart, Probably you should write this down somewhere. I don't think the definition is in the slide, but if you want to, please do write it down. It is a horizontal bar chart that represents a set of tasks. It is a horizontal bar chart that represents a set of tasks in a project. It is a horizontal bar chart that represents a set of tasks in a project. Now, some of the things that are generally involved in a Gantt chart is you have a start date and an end date, and the length of the bar generally indicates its duration. Now, the Gantt chart, it has a start date. Let's say first task, marketing research, starts on the 16th of August and finishes on the 30th of August. So it has a start date and an end date. And the entire bar generally represents the duration of the tasks. So 16 to 30, that's about 15 days altogether, inclusive of day 16. So 15 days. Okay, so the duration is 15 days here. So this is a example of a Gantt chart. In slide number 11, you are able to see an example of a PERT chart. So with PERT chart, you have the tasks stated in. It also has the start date and the end date. Okay, so what you're seeing here is 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, and then 13, 10. Now those may be the task IDs, and what you're seeing is 0D, 20D, 25D. So D indicates days, so that is the duration. So generally in a PERT chart, you have the task name, the task ID, the duration, start date, and the end date. Okay. If it sounds too confusing in the moment, don't worry about it. We'll go over this in the lab class. PERT chart, we'll go over it. Now, do notice in your PERT chart is you have the boxes in red and you have some boxes in. So what was the other detail you said for the Gantt chart? Shannon, just to answer your question, I think I mentioned the definition of the Gantt chart and I said the Gantt chart, this is general information. The Gantt chart generally has a start date and the end date, and the bar represents the duration. Let me repeat that. The Gantt chart has a start date and an end date, and the bar represents the duration. Now, what I was showing earlier is in the PERT chart, you'll notice that you have something in red, and then you have these boxes in blue. So whichever is indicating in red, that means that is the most appropriate path that project team will take to complete this particular project. And this path is called as critical path. Okay. Let me repeat that. The red ones is called a critical path, and these ones generally they have been ignored by the project team. What is a PERT chart? Now, the PERT chart is also sometimes referred to as a bottom-up technique. Okay, so it has project tasks. Once you know the tasks, their duration, and the order in which they must be performed, you can calculate the time that it will take to complete the project. This is some generic information. Okay. Now, which type of chart is better? So this is in comparison with Gantt chart and PERT chart. Although a Gantt chart offers valuable snapshot view of the project, the PERT chart are more useful for scheduling, monitoring, and controlling the entire project. So generally, if we compare the two between a Gantt chart and a PERT chart, and if you want to say which one is better, okay, it is generally the PERT chart. Why? Because it is more useful in terms of scheduling, monitoring, and controlling the actual work. Slide number 14. Identify tasks in the work breakdown structure. So if you want to identify the tasks in a work breakdown structure, so these are some of the tasks. You have task or activity, you have event or milestone, and then break the project down in smaller tasks, creating a work breakdown structure. So generally, if you look at the definition for a task or activity, is a task or activity, it is a work that has a beginning and an end. So when you look at the opposite of task and activity, you have the word operations. So operations are something that are run on regular basis and does not have a beginning and an end, whereas a task or an activity generally has a beginning and an end. Moreover, the task and activity, they require the use of company resources such as people, time, or money. Now, these tasks that it is talking about, this is not the regular tasks that you're running on daily basis. These are something additional compared to your normal operation. So therefore, if you are saying it requires the use of company resources such as people, time, and money, it may require additional people, it may require additional time, and additional finances as well. Event or milestone, they mean the same thing. Okay, generally it is a more like a recognizable reference point. It is like a recognizable reference point that is used to monitor progress. Now, if you want to have a milestone for yourself, you would say, all right, so one of my biggest milestones so far was let's say you completing year 13 examination and you have passed. So that is like a milestone for your life. So when we say milestone, it's just like a success point, or it's just like a recognizable reference point. So likewise, we have something similar with our projects as well. So let's say you have project planning, and in the middle of project planning, you have something like systems request. So that is one of the deliverables in project planning. You have your systems request form being done. So that could be one of the milestones. Or you have just finished the project and you will say systems development completed. So that could be another milestone. Okay, so these are generally the reference points that basically may encourage you or help you to monitor the things are progressing within the project. Now, how do we create a work breakdown structure? So we try to identify the tasks in a work breakdown structure. So the first thing that you do is you'll be listing the tasks. It can be challenging because the tasks might be embedded in a document. Create a table with column for task number, description, duration, and predecessor tasks. So when you look at the work breakdown structure, is you are trying to break down the big tasks into tiny smaller tasks. The reason why you do it, so that it becomes easily achievable, and also it gives you a sense of motivation as soon as you're able to complete the small task. Now in real life, something similar may happen as well. Now, if you have a very big set of work to do, okay, which may take you about 6 or 7 months to do it, and you try to measure that as a whole, it might seem over time, it may seem like you're not achieving your goal. But the entire goal, if you try to break it down into tiny smaller tasks, so that at the end of the week, it gives you a sort of like a reason to celebrate it for. Okay, so that motivates you that, okay, I have done this, I have completed this, so next I'll go and do that. I'll tell you another thing. Let's say you're doing your bachelor's program at the moment and you want to do PhD later onwards. So if you're directly thinking of doing your bachelor's and then enrolling into a PhD program, it might take you close to about 9 to 10 years to complete. So that's the time frame. And just in case, instead of directly enrolling into a PhD program in a very highly classified university, and if you go around doing a postgrad first, so that might take you 2 years. So that gives you a milestone to celebrate for. And then after 2 years, you may complete your master's degree. So that gives you another 2 to 4 years. It may take 2 to 4 years for you to complete the master's degree. So that gives you another sense of motivation and something to celebrate for as well. Likewise, to do your PhD, it might take you another 5 or 6 years from there. So again, something to stay motivated for those milestones. So likewise, something similar happens here in a project team. So the entire big phase is broken down into tiny chunks or tiny tasks. And once we actually do it, we have to list it down somewhere. And that list is called a work breakdown structure. Now, how do we go around creating work breakdown structure? Something that you're seeing on the slide at the moment. It generally consists of a table. Now, why do we need it to be in form of a table? It's a very simple reason. It can be without, you can have it without those in the table, but it gives you a good tabular structure. Okay, makes your work look easy. So in your work breakdown structure, you have few things. You have the task number, okay, that may enact like your very first column. You have the description, okay, so your task 1 example is given there, reserve the meeting room. So that's your very first description of the task. And then the number of days it may take for you to actually complete the task. And then you have predecessor tasks. What predecessor tasks are is some of the tasks that you need to complete beforehand, then you can go on to the next tasks. For instance, it's a common norm. You can't eat your food unless and until you have brushed your teeth. Okay, so let's say the point is, okay, have breakfast. Predecessor would be brush your teeth, something like that. Now, in predecessor tasks, we do not normally list down the description, but we list down the task numbers. So it's like order the marketing materials. The predecessor task over here is going to be 1. You're referring to task 1. Let's say send out customer emails. So you can only send out customer emails once the manager has briefed about something. Okay, so the predecessor would be task number 3 in here, and so forth. To estimate how much time or the duration a task would take, there is a formula, and the formula is B plus 4P. 4P would be 4 times P, or 4 multiplied by P, plus W, whereby B stands for best case scenario. So in the best based environment, in the best case scenario, this is the number of days, you're measuring here in terms of days. This is number of days it will take to complete the tasks. So that's best case scenario. And then P is like a probable case scenario. Probable is you giving a probability. Okay, probable case scenario. And W is the worst case scenario. So in the worst case scenario, it will take me this many days to complete this particular task of the project. Now, so which one takes the shortest time? Which of the case estimates takes the shortest time? The best, the probable, or the worst? Think about it. Which one would take the shortest time? Best case, probable case, or worst case? Anyone? Best case would take the shortest time. When we say best case, it's just like you have everything on hand. Time is in your favor. You have budget which is in your favor. You have resources which are in your favor, and everything is going well. So that's the best case. Okay, and best case estimate. And the estimates which is going to take the most time is the worst case. So in worst case estimates, you generally consider a few things. You'll say, okay, what if our financer drops out? What if our sales go down, and because of that, the organization is not able to fund the project anymore? What if our supplier, who is supposed to supply us with some software, they're not able to supply us on time? What if there's a COVID-19 outbreak and we go out into a lockdown? What do you do then? These are worst case scenarios. So these are some of the things generally that you would cater when you are trying to estimate the task duration. Now, person days. Now, what person days mean is generally the number of days required for one person to complete a task. That's person days. Okay. Now, another thing to consider is when you are generally estimating the task duration, you need to consider the working days only. Now, working days may vary within the organizations. Some organizations, they have working days Monday to Fridays only. Some of them have working days such as Monday to Friday plus a half day of Saturday. Some of them may be Monday to Friday and the full of Saturday, so 6 days in total. And some of them, they operate 7 days. Okay, there are some businesses who would be operating on 7 days. If you're running an online business, you're running 24/7. Okay, so you need to consider all these things as well. So with that said, the formula is you have the best case estimates plus 4 times your probable case estimate plus your worst case estimates, and you divide the value by 6. That will give you an estimate task duration. Next up is identifying tasks in a work breakdown structure. So some of the things that you would be looking at when you are trying to come up with the duration of your task. When I say duration, how many days it would take to complete your task. So you're looking at 4 specific factors. First one is project size and project scope. Project size is how big or how small the project is. Scope is generally the objective, what all things you need to achieve in the project. So that's factor 1. Factor number 2 is you have human resources. Now, human resources, the most important thing you consider is the number of people who are working on a project task. If you have only 1 person, that might take more time. If you have 4 people, that might take a little faster. Or let's say if you have about 20 or 30 people, that's even more faster. Now, that human resources factor is also dependent on the project size. If your project size is small, you cannot have 20 people working in a project, can you? You can't. So therefore, your human resources is also dependent on the size and the scope of the project. Now, other human resource factors would be is the team morale, how well the team is working with one another. Okay, if there's too much of hire and fire within the project team, when I say hire and fire, a lot of people are fired and a lot of set of new people are hired, it'll take longer. Why? If a new person comes in, he or she would need to start learning the project from the very beginning and then reach the point where this particular staff was fired. So it also takes time. Moreover, what happens is majority of the things depend on the project manager in terms of how he or she is managing the team. If the project manager is, let's say, very egoistic, when I say egoistic, there's too much ego, there's too much of personalized factors which affect the team. So this might delay the tasks even more. Third is the experience with similar project. Now over here, experience of the project manager with similar projects is important, as well as the project team. If the project manager has a lot of experience in such projects, the good thing is he or she is able to disseminate or pass down this information to the team members. If the team members is also very experienced in similar project with the experience of the team manager, that's a plus point. Okay. But if a project manager is a novice, someone who is quite new into project management, that may be troublesome. So therefore, it may take more time for a task to be completed compared to the project manager who has done work and is experienced. And then finally, you have constraints. Another word for constraints would be limitations. Okay, there may be many limitations in a project. For example, if let's say project can be almost anything, right? So if somebody is building a house, it's also like a project. So the project manager is probably the construction foreman who is leading the entire project. So if the project is building a house and if it rains on a particular day, so the outer structure may come to a stop because it rained. So that's a limitation, it's a constraint. And majority of these constraints can and cannot be controlled. If you are involved in a project which involves building a bridge and all of a sudden the water supply comes to a stop, so that's a constraint. Okay, and the thing is, constraints can be encountered. In terms of a house, if you cannot build something outside, you can go and start working from inside. Instead, for construction of a bridge, if you have no water supply from the tap, you can always hire a truck who can actually supply you water. But these generally comes with additional resources, and these tend to affect the duration of the task. So these are some of the things that you may need to consider when you're coming up with the duration of a project. Now, this is important. Please do note it down somewhere. Factors affecting the duration of the work breakdown task. Now, step 2, task pattern. So you have tasks. So far, what you have learned is you have work breakdown structure. Now, the two ways in which you can demonstrate your work breakdown structure is either through the use of a Gantt chart or a PERT or CPM, critical path method charts. Now, we have also looked at that in order for you to have a work breakdown structure, you need to have a table, something like this. Okay, you have task number, the task description. Now, these things are very simple. It can be directly listed down. But what becomes important is how do you determine the duration of your tasks? And we have come up with a formula. Now, while you're doing that, or while you're considering the formulas in your mind, you also need to come into the realization that there are some factors that generally affect duration. And those factors are project size and scope, human resources, experience with similar project, and constraints. Any questions so far? Any questions so far? Thank you, Shannon. Okay, anyone else? No question? Okay, if no question, let's continue. Now, we've looked at the duration of the task. After duration, we are going to look at task pattern. Okay, now the task pattern, we'll read this down and then I'll try to explain these simple terms. What are task patterns? Okay, they are large or small. Tasks depend on each other and must be performed in a sequence, not unlike the commands in a software program. Now, sequence, that means they need to be performed one after the other. Task patterns can involve dependent tasks, multiple successor tasks, and multiple predecessor tasks. Now, let's have a look at this. So task patterns, it can be something that is small or something that can be large. Okay. Now, they are performed in sequence. When I say sequence, they have to be performed one after the other. If you have a sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you can't perform 5 first and then jump into 1. It's impossible. You have to go 1, 2, let's say 3, 4 can be performed together, 1, 2, and then 3 form together, and then 3, 4 derives task number 5. Okay, so it has to follow a sequence. Moreover, there are 3 types of task patterns. You have dependent tasks, that means tasks that are dependent on one another. You have successor tasks, that means multiple successor rather. So from a single tasks, you have 2 tasks derived, and then you have multiple predecessor. So that means from 2 tasks, you have 1 task derived. We'll learn more about this in the next few slides. Okay, so task patterns, how do I use task box to create a model? Okay, so you have a task box over here. It's a format that you generally use in PERT chart. So you have the task name, you have the start day, the finish day, task ID, and duration. Now here's the thing, not necessarily they can be what the structure is. You will have the task name on top, that's very common. You can have the task ID on the other side, you can have task duration up here, start date, finish date. It's totally up to you how you actually want to have the task box format. But it becomes your responsibility is when you're making something like this, right at the very beginning, you need to give a format of how you want things to be and then start filling in the actual values. Okay. So the types of task patterns, there are 3 main types. First one is dependent tasks, when tasks must be completed one after another. So you have dependent tasks. Let's say tasks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's re-go into that example. So you have task 1, 2. So once you have completed task 1 and then you jump into task 2. So that means task 2 is dependent on task 1. Task 3 is dependent on task 2. So this is an example of dependent tasks. Multiple successor tasks. When several tasks can start at the same time, each is called a concurrent task. Let's go back to the example. You have task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So task 1 is completed first, followed by task 2 rather. And we said from task 2, we'll have task 3 and 4 together, performed together. So what happens is, therefore, task 2 distributes task 3 and 4. So task 3 and 4 are called multiple successor tasks. All right. And then finally, you have multiple predecessor tasks. So multiple predecessor tasks requires 2 or more prior tasks to be completed before it can start. In other words, remember task 3 and 4, they're completed together. So once they're completed together, they derive task 5. So therefore, on task 5, the predecessor is going to be tasks 3 and 4. So these are multiple predecessor tasks. Now, if you would allow me to do so, let me just open up a Word document and then actually show it to you so that it would make much more sense. Okay, so we have a total of 5 tasks. Task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's quickly go and draw this. So you have task 1, task 2, and then task 3, and then task 4, and then task 5. Okay, let's have a look at this. Now, we said there are 3 types of tasks. The first one that we had a look at was, okay, you had dependent tasks. So if you look at task 2 is dependent on task 1. Task 3 is dependent on task 2. Task 5 is dependent on task 4 and 5. So that's on dependent tasks. Now, multiple successor tasks. So when we say dependent is the opposite of successor. So for example, the successor of task 1 is task 2. That means what task will come in after task 1, that's task 2. So when you look at multiple successes is whereby you have more than one. So task 3 and 4 are multiple successes of task 2. Okay, and task 5 is a successor of tasks 3 and 4. So whereby you have a single successor which is derived from multiple tasks, they are called multiple predecessors. So task 3 and 4 are multiple predecessors of task 5. Now, it may sound confusing at the moment, but you'll have to learn this because these things are important. And generally, these kind of questions appear in your exams. And in the final assessments, okay, I would say you should thank God in one way in that you don't have final exams, because in final exams you were generally The face-to-face final exams generally had students drawing multiple types of charts in CIN 603. So in online base, you will not be asked to draw the charts, but charts can be drawn and you can be asked questions from within those tasks, from those charts rather. Okay, so please ensure that you learn this. Now, can you put a note somewhere that these are important? And please learn dependent tasks, multiple successor tasks, and multiple predecessor tasks. Not just generally know this, but you should also learn and understand how they work in a PERT chart. Okay, slide number 21. How do I identify task patterns? You can identify task patterns by looking carefully at the wording of the task statement. Words like then, when, or, and, are action words that signal a sequence of events. Now, it's pretty simple, okay? What the question is asking is, if you have a essay given, if you have a paragraph given, okay, how would you go around identifying tasks or task patterns? So what you have to do is, first of all, you have to carefully read it, right? You have to carefully read what it's saying. Then you have to start looking at the wordings. And words like, then, when, or, are, okay? So these words gives you that interconnecting concepts, or those interconnecting phases. And with that, what you can do is you can indicate the sequence of the events. All right, let me repeat that. And this is what generally happens. You will be given a paragraph, you will be given a you'll be given multiple paragraphs sometimes, and from there you are supposed to identify the tasks. After you have identified the tasks, you will go and identify what would be the predecessors, what would be the successors, or what would be the dependent tasks. Now, how do you do it? By looking at the wording, by looking at the wording structure. And some of the common words would be then. For example, let's say you're supposed to have a meeting with someone, okay? So the first thing you'll do is you will write down to-do lists or create a to-do list. Then, hear me out, you will do a to-do list, then you will print out something. So then would mean, okay, after you have basically created to-do list, then you'll do something. So what the printing out, the predecessor is going to be to-do tasks, something like that. And then you have when, or, are. So these are some of the action words that generally indicate sequence of events. What is a critical path? Okay, what is a critical path? Now, critical path analysis is generally done using something what you are seeing on the screen at the moment. Now with that, you will have to go and determine what is the critical path. The concept is called critical path analysis. That means you'll have to go and analyze and see which path is the critical path. Now, in general, when you look at critical path, these are the series of tasks which, if delayed, would affect the completion date of the overall project. Okay, let me repeat that. So critical path is a series of tasks, things that you have to do in a project. If they are delayed, it would affect the overall completion date of the project. So let's say in case if it happens something like that and the overall completion date is affected, there will be more things that would trickle down. For example, you will have more resources being exhausted, you'll have more finances being put in place, you'll require more time to be completed, and most importantly, your reputation may take a downfall. Okay, so critical path allows you to avoid such situations. Now, if you have a look at the diagram that is given to you on your screen on slide number 22, okay, so you have few tasks. You have 5 tasks. So first task is task ID 1 here. So first task is obtain authorization. It starts on day 1 and finishes on day 10, and the duration is 10 days. So no specific date is given, but it just says day 1, day 10. Duration is 10 days. Second task ID is task 2. Over here, task 2 involves hiring of an analyst. So the hiring portion starts on day 11 and finishes on day 40. So the duration is 30 days. Now, task ID 3 tells you to plan training. So the planning actually starts on day 41 and finishes on 45. Now, while planning is taking place, you have another tasks that takes place on the same time. Okay. Now, what do we call this kind of tasks? Let's go back. Concurrent tasks. When several tasks can start at the same time, each is called a concurrent task. So you have another concurrent task called arrange logistics, which is ID'd as 4, starts on day 41 and finishes on day 65. And the duration is 25 days. And finally, announce training. So that starts on day 66. And then duration is another 30 days and finishes on day 95. And you notice that this particular task is ID'd as task 5. Now from this, you are supposed to go and determine your critical path. Notice this, you have day 1 plus 10. So you have day 1 and the duration is 10. So it takes 10 days to finish. Okay, so that means on the other side, you'll start with day 11. So 1 plus 10 gives you 11. So here, so you write down 11 is your start date for the next task. Duration is 30. So 11 plus 30 gives you a total of 41. Now it finishes in 40 here because you need to count in day 11 is inclusive. Day 11 is inclusive. So it gives you inclusive of 30 days with 11 would be 40. Starts the next task on 41. Now 41, or what you can say is, if you do not want to confuse yourself with the inclusion phase, what you can do is you can consider this. So it finishes in 40. So 40, the finish date of the previous task with the duration of the current task. So 40 plus 5 gives you 45. Now that sounds okay so far. Okay, now have a look at this. So this also finishes in 40. So 40 plus 25 gives you a total of 65. So this is fine. Now look at your announced training date. Announced training date starts on day 66. Now if you have a look at this, 40 plus 5 gives you 45. And 45 plus 30 gives you what? 75, which does not matches here in this point. That means this task is going to be eliminated. And then have a look at this. So 65 plus 30 gives you a total of 95. So this generally matches. So therefore, your critical path is going to be 1, 2, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 4, 5. Confusing? Janesh, is it confusing?
Yes, sir.
It is a bit confusing. Okay, now just at the moment, let's just go an overview of it, like what I have already done. That's all right. In our lab class, this is what we'll be working on. This is a PERT chart. This is an example of a PERT chart. So using a PERT chart, we'll go and do a critical path analysis. So we'll reserve this for our lab class. Is that fine? Ganesh, fine? Okay, so we're going to have a look at this in our lab class. So that means on our Thursday's class, on our Thursday's class, first of all, we'll go over tutorial. And then in this, probably after an hour, then we'll start looking at the lab. So Junior, that will match your time. Right, Junior? You'll be joining us from 10:30. So that will match your time and you should be able to join us. So you won't miss onto the lab session. This is important. Why? Because this is important because this could be one of the questions that could be tested in your mid-semester exam. So you can be given a table, something like this, and you will be asked to fill the values. Okay, critical path analysis. Slide number 23, project monitoring and control. Now, the monitoring and control phase is as important as any other phase of the system development lifecycle. In fact, this may be one of the most important phases of them all, because monitoring and control techniques take place from the beginning till the very end, and to the portion where the project is finished, has finished rather, since the once the project is finished, and even when the organization starts using the system, monitoring and control is still in the process. Okay, the project manager must keep track of tasks and progress of team members, compare actual progress with the project plan, verify the completion of the project milestones, and set standards and ensure that they are followed. Now, why do we enforce monitoring and control techniques? So that we are able to keep track of tasks. That's one. Secondly, if there is no monitoring and control, then there's no measurable ways to actually go and look at the progress. 3, what you want to do with monitoring and control is you want to compare your plan versus your progress. In other words, what you had planned at the very beginning and what you're doing now and how you're progressing, you want to compare that. Moreover, monitoring and control, what it does, it enforces a sense of quality in your projects. When we say sense of quality, we also look at standards. So you are continuously monitoring and controlling things. So therefore, the standards is maintained or improvised. And finally, what you're doing is when you are monitoring and controlling the project, you are ensuring that you are meeting all the allocated milestones that you had set right at the very beginning of the project. Okay, please do make a note somewhere, project monitoring and control technique. What I want you to look at is basically a question as to why these techniques are important. So I mentioned a few, is also mentioned in your slide. It's just like it provides a good tracking for your tasks. It provides a measurable progress. It allows you to compare your plan versus the progress. It allows you to enforce quality, enforce standards, and also achieve milestones. Maintaining a schedule. Maintaining a schedule can be a challenging task. Why challenging? Because it's very difficult to control most of the things in a project, like especially schedule. When talking about schedule, you're talking about time, and like the saying says, time and tide waits for no man. Okay, so time is something that requires a lot of grasp of it. You need to grasp time a lot compared to any other thing in a project, because you're controlling people. Okay, and one thing you'll notice is that when you compare humans with machines, machines, they run on time. Humans, they can also run on time, but if not controlled well, if not managed well, they can run out of time. All right, so it becomes a very challenging task. Second point, the better the original plan, the easier it will be to control the project. Very true. Okay, the better the original plan, how you develop the original plan, how you schedule things, the easier it will be to control the project. Now, this is a general saying, is that when you try to allocate task durations for your tasks, or when you try to allocate time for your project task, always try to overstate it rather than understating. In other words, if you feel that a particular task and you're very sure that a particular task will be finished within, let's say, 10 days, instead of allocating 10 days, allocate about 12 or 13 days. Why? When you're allocating 12 or 13 days, what you're doing is you are overstating the resources. Just in case if there are any unforeseen circumstances, you still have time on you. 2 or 3 days more on you. If you run out of resources, you have run out of finance, okay, you have additional finance that is created for right at the very planning stage. Okay, so that's why it says the better the original plan, the easier it will be to control the project. Project managers often spend most of their time tracking the tasks along the critical path because delays in those tasks have the greatest potential to delay or jeopardize the project. So over here is talking about, project managers actually they need to go and control and monitor things in such a way so that they do not go beyond or they do not lose track of the critical path. Now, what this is generally called as is when you go out of schedule, when you go out of time, it's called something as a schedule creep. Remember, we had a project creep, we had scope creep. Now you have schedule creep as well. Now, schedule creep is you are continuously going out of your time. And what is the general outcome for continuous schedule creep is failure or downfall in the project. So when we talk about failure or downfall, you're talking about exhausting your time, you're talking about exhausting resources, you're talking about wasting money and wasting finances, or you're talking about poor quality projects. Let me repeat that. When you talk about schedule creep, and I would suggest for you to note this down somewhere. When you talk about schedule creep, you're talking about continuously going out of time or out of planned time. And some factors that would be very much affected would be time, resources, money, quality. When you talk about time, it's about you running out of time. You're wasting time. When you talk about resources, you are exhausting the resources. Talk about money, you have wasted a lot of money once the project fails. And also you have achieved a downsized quality than you actually had desired. Reporting. Reporting here generally refers to who reports to whom. Now, even though you're the project manager, you do need to report to someone. If you're working in the team, you will still need to report to the project manager. Why reporting plays a very keen role? Because reports generally allows you to track your progress. Reports generally tell you, okay, what things went wrong and where, and how you can go or how the thing was resolved. And in future projects, these reports basically enact like a model. When I say model, it's just like you have something prepared for you to guide through. It acts like a model so that future problems could be well encountered. Now, reporting of project team regularly report, members of the project team regularly report their progress. Project status meetings to discuss project status, issues, problems, and opportunities. So if you would have a look at the diagram, so this is what happens. The project team members, they report their progress to the project manager. So what the project manager does is that he or she collects those reports. And it's not going to be just one, it's going to be many, okay? Because the project team members may be consecutively working on several tasks. So all those tasks need to be reported. So the project manager collects, they verifies. He or she does not just collect, he or she would need to verify. I can be a project team member, and if I know that my project manager is slack, I can always go and overstate the tasks, which I have not done. So that's why the project manager needs to collect, verify, organize, and evaluate the information. And then what he does, he creates a summary of all the reports into one single report, simple one, and then he gives it out to the management team, to the finances, to the business partners, to the users, or in general terms, to all the stakeholders that are involved in the project and whom he or she needs to report to. Project status reports. A project manager must regularly on his or her, a project manager must report regularly on his or her immediate supervisor, upper management, and users. We just mentioned it, okay, on daily basis. Why? To keep a good track of the progress. Should explain what you are doing to handle and monitor the problem. Now, what the notes is leading us to is especially reporting in terms of problems. Okay. Now, why problems need to be reported as soon as possible is that it rather alerts the management team. It lets them know that something has gone wrong, and they are always ready to act or react to it in ways, in methods to resolve that issue. Okay. Third point, most managers recognize that problems do occur on most projects. It is better to alert the management team sooner rather than later. Okay, so we have problems and issues which need to be updated as soon as possible. Now, generally what happens is that if a project manager comes in or system analysis even comes in, okay, and their work for an organization is, it's there in the contract generally that if there is an issue, it needs to be reported ASAP. Why? As soon as possible, because so the management team can be ever ready for the events that is supposed to unfold in days to come. Risk management. Every IT project involves risks, and risks that system analysis and project managers must address risk management. It's pretty common. Okay, there is not a situation within a project or even if you look around in almost anything where we do not have risks. It is involved in all places, but it all comes down to how you go around managing your risks. Okay, like the term goes is risks and changes are inevitable. That means you have no control over them. Okay, they'll always be there. Now, in this case, where there is risks in projects, the experience matter generally counts. How experienced your team members are, and most importantly, how experienced your project manager is. So the handling of tasks becomes a easy transition if your manager is experienced and can manage things well. If it is a novice user, there's a likely chance he or she might cause a blunder, or he or she might start panicking. Now, some of the things that must be involved in risk management is you need to develop a risk management plan. Now, this needs to be developed right at the very beginning in the planning structure. Okay, once you're planning things, risk management plan needs to be there beforehand. And also in the plan, you need to list down how you'll go on identifying the risks. Okay, it's a different case of you identifying the risks and a different case of you actually resolving the risks or mitigating the risks. Unless and until you identify it, you won't be able to resolve it. So identifying becomes the first task. Okay, so you should identify it, and then once you've identified, analyze it. Analyzing in terms of, is it manageable? Is it something that is going to affect the project? And then you need to create a risk response plan. Risk response plan basically is a plan of how you'll tackle a specific risks or risks, and then monitor risks. That means once you have responded, you have mitigated the risks. So you need to monitor and see whether it still affects the project or the risks had faded away. In simple terms, okay, risk management, like we've said, risks are inevitable. So experience matter counts in terms of handling risks. And some ways in which a project manager can handle risk is proper planning at the very planning stage, okay, and then identification of risks, analysis and mitigation of the risks, and then monitoring the risks. Okay, planning, identification, analysis, mitigation, monitoring. Managing for success, business issues. The major objective of every system is to provide a solution to a business problem or opportunity. Lecture 1, we've learned it. Okay, so why a new system is being created is basically to resolve a problem or to make services better. A system that falls short of business needs also produces problems for users and reduces employee morale and productivity. So generally, let's say there was a group of people who have worked on a project and has worked on it for about 2 or 3 years, and the project has failed. Now, 2 or 3 years, It's a long time. Sometimes some projects may take lesser time, let's say 2 or 3 months, some 2 or 3 years, sometimes even a decade, or sometimes more than that. Now, just imagine people working in NASA. So they have come up with a new rocket or something like that. That takes them about 30, 40 years to come up with a small rocket or something like that. Okay. Or they want to go and reach Mars or reach Moon or wherever they want to reach. Okay. So some of them may have started when they were in their early 20s, and now they must be 50, in 50s, when the entire project actually took place, or actually got completed rather. So it takes time. So in that case, if a project fails, it reduces employee morale and productivity. Okay. Now, all these kind of projects or shortfalls on projects generally leads to a not just a big impact on employee morale. It basically leads to financial factors as well. Why financial factors? Because if it's a long-term project, a lot of time, effort, and resources has been used in that particular project, and eventually it may affect the business objectives and goals. Even budget issues. Okay, so if you are trying to manage your success, so another important thing to reconsider is budget issues. By the way, the previous slide here, business issues, do make a note somewhere that you need to learn this. And also risk management, the steps in risk management is important. Please do make a note on risk management steps in risk management, put a note somewhere, and managing for success, the business issues. Now we're looking at managing for success in budget issues. Costs overrun typically results from one or more of the following. Okay, you'll have unrealistic estimates, failure to develop an accurate forecast that considers all costs over the life of the project. In simple terms, you have made estimates of the funds that is going to be used and which is understated. That's what it means there, point two. Point three, poor monitoring of progress and slow response to early warning signs of problems. Just like, I was saying in risk management, if you're not able to identify risks well and on time, it can cause problems. So that's what it's mentioning here. Poor monitoring of progress and slow response to early warning signs of problems. Also, you have schedule delays due to factors that were not foreseen. Okay, that means something went wrong in your planning phase and you have not considered unforeseen circumstances. So you ran behind the date, the completion date of the project, and then your budget went just haywire. And finally, human resource issues, including turnovers. When we say turnovers, people hiring and firing, inadequate training and motivation. Okay, so if employees are not working well, the project is not going to be completed on time. If it's not going to be completed on time, it leads to failure of the project, which would finally affect the budget. So when you are managing project, let's go and summarize these two slides. So when you are managing success for projects, okay, you have budget issues that must be considered, and we looked at some of the things. So first one, we know that budget issues generally come from poor planning. Okay, and we also know poor planning may result into poor monitoring and control. Furthermore, poor budgeting issues that affect success of projects come from unrealistic estimates. In now, unrealistic estimates, if I have to give an example, it would be something like this. If I know a task in a project, okay, I was too overconfident and I've said it will take 4 days to complete. But instead of taking it 4 days, it took 20 days to complete. So that's a unrealistic estimates. And what happens is that, so 16 days, the project is going to be pulled into future, affecting the other tasks and also the resources. So unrealistic estimates. Another thing that may cause budget issues is failure to stick to the plan. Now, this is the general cause of failure in most of the projects, is people do not want to stick to the plan. So once they go out of the plan, or if the project was planned very poorly at the very beginning, so once they go out of the plan, things just get messed up. And then you have unforeseen factors, For example, very good case, COVID-19 lockdowns, or let's say something happened, the finance are pulled out, or let's say there was a cyclone or something like that. So during cyclone time, who would want to complete their project when they have got a houses and family to protect? Okay, so unforeseen factors. Another thing that we got mentioned in the slides were inadequate training. If the staffs are not trained well, okay, so they do not know what to do. They don't know how to handle things well. So that generally leads to poor motivation, and also they are not competent enough. Another thing is you have lack of staff. So sometimes in project tasks, if there are fewer people who are actually working on those tasks, so fewer people means it's going to take slower to complete. Okay, and another thing is internal politicizing. When we talk about internal politicizing, it's about people working within the organization. Then they start politicizing things. Now, in other words, it's just like they are going against each other. They are, probably one person wouldn't like the project manager, so they would be doing things or going to the management team complaining and all those things. All those human factors, you must be familiar with that, how people do things and what issues might be around. So we'll just categorize it into one as internal politicizing. Okay, so that may also lead to budget issues. Schedule issues. Problems with timetables and project milestones can indicate a failure to recognize task dependencies, confusion between effort and progress, poor monitoring and control methods, personality conflicts among team members, or turnover of project personnel. So what it simply talks about is what are some of the schedule issues that can fail a project. Okay, so the first one, let me just go quickly summarize this, okay, so that it becomes easy for you to understand, is not sticking to plan. Okay, so you're not sticking to the plan, so what happens is that you run behind your schedule. And then failure to recognize task patterns. Now where I'm saying this from here, first one is poor timetable, is not sticking to the plan. Project milestones can indicate failure to recognize task dependencies. So that is like you are not able to recognize the task patterns. So generally, we know that there are three types of task patterns: dependencies, predecessors, and successors. So if you're not able to recognize them well, what happens is that you are not able to stick to your schedule, and generally you lag behind. Third point is poor monitoring and control. Poor monitoring control, if it's not applied well. So remember, we mentioned earlier on, when you have good monitoring and control, you have a scenario whereby you're always trying to compare with what you had planned and how you're progressing. So that allows you rather to keep these elements aligned. If you're not aligned with what you have planned and what you're progressing with, so that's a problem, and that problem generally leads to schedule issues. And then poor project management skills or decision making. Now this generally goes on part of the project manager. Okay, if there's poor project management skills or poor decision making skills, okay, that can lead to delay in the project, affecting schedule. And you have personality conflicts between team members. Okay, bringing people generally bringing in their egos in the work environment, that generally leads to personal conflicts and generally cause schedule issues. And finally, turnover rates. So turnover rates is like the hire and fire of personnel within the project team. If it's frequent, if you have more people being fired and more people coming in, that will cause delay. For example, you are just near completion to your project, something went wrong, a person left. So you're bringing a new staff. So that new staff needs to be trained, needs to be updated in such a way that he or she is able to continue the work they had left, the previous staff had left. Now that is just about the project team, the project personnel. What if a project manager leaves then? That would be an issue of its own. So if a project manager leaves, so that's going to be a big time drama. Why? Because you had one person with a different type of management skill, different types of experience bringing in, and then that person leaves, another coming in is going to be completely different. Okay, just imagine if you have you had, let's say, all of you went through the high school system, so you had a form teacher and that form teacher left and you had another one coming in. So he or she had different personality, he or she had different ways of doing things. Same thing here. The bottom line, when problems occur, the project manager's ability to handle situations becomes the critical factor. Sometimes when a project experiences delays or cost overruns, the budget still can be delivered on time and within budget if several less critical requirements are trimmed. Now, in simple terms, okay, what I had mentioned earlier, the project manager's ability to handle the situation becomes a critical factor. Now, with the ability comes experience. With the experience, also we have something called as interpersonal skills, analytical skills, communication skills, manageability skills. Now, these things are also important. This is from lecture one. I'm things that I'm quoting from. In lecture one, we discussed that these are some of the things, or these are some of the qualities that a project manager should possess. If he or she, in general, does have these qualities, then it becomes easy to get the project in line and completed and be labeled it as a success. Okay, if these qualities are not in a project manager, things will be difficult over time. And the second point, sometimes when a project experiences delay or cost overruns, now this is normal, it'll happen in one time or the other. Okay, so what it can be done is, okay, the project manager can go around trimming the less critical requirements, or at the initial stage, if in the planning stage, if things were overestimated to an extent, okay, so these wouldn't matter. Chapter summary. Project management is a process of planning, scheduling, monitoring, and controlling, and reporting upon the development of an information system. Project managers are responsible for project planning, scheduling, monitoring, and reporting. So the definition of project management is given. You're looking at planning things in the project. Scheduling, when you talk about scheduling, you're talking about time. Now, with time comes in money. Okay, you're looking at monitoring and controlling. When you look at monitoring and controlling, it's just a way of overlooking that things are going well. Okay, and you're comparing with things that you had planned and how things are progressing, and you have to report all these things to the management team. So that's project management. Now, who is responsible to do all these things? You have the project manager. The planning and scheduling monitoring, and reporting all take place within a larger project development framework. Now, what happens here is, what it simply means is, generally when the scope of the project is large, when your project is very, very big, then you have these things more detailed, and in not just detailed, in way more finer details. Okay. In project scheduling, the project manager develops a specific time for each task based on available resources and whether or not the task is dependent on other predecessor tasks. So this is generally talking about the task patterns. Okay, so your work breakdown structure, you're identifying the tasks, and then you are identifying the task patterns and the duration. Every successful information system must support business requirements, stay within budget, and be available on time. Sound project management involves the same skills as many other management. And that finishes your lecture slides. All right, any questions, any queries from anyone? Any questions, any queries from anyone? See, in general, it takes time, and it will take some reading effort for you to actually understand all things in depth. Okay, these are new concepts. Generally in theory, when you come across new concepts, it will take time for you to understand things. So you'll have to go around reading it, and also do attempt the tutorial questions. Once you attempt the tutorial questions, your ability to understand things will become better. Okay. Now, any questions, any queries before we knock off the class for today? Okay, thank you, Semi. If no questions and if no queries, this is where we'll call it today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. Thank you for your time and effort. I do hope that all of you are doing well. Please take care, stay well, okay? And do attempt your lecture tutorial, your lecture-based quiz and your tutorial too. So thank you very much. See you all in our tutorial class. In our tutorial class, we're not just going to be working on tutorial, but we'll also be going to work on curve charts. Now, curve charts, they're a bit difficult to understand, but once you do 1 or 2 exercises, it'll be easy. Okay, so do come in for this class. Thank you so much. Bye.